Okay, cool. I know most of you, so it's not really a huge thing, but I'm going to introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. I'm Sean. A little bit about me. It's not even showing what I want to show you. Let's show the thing I actually want to show you. Here we go. You can find this lesson plan thing. This is what every week will look like, basically. There'll be a lesson plan there for you, so if you miss the class, you are welcome to just download the lesson plan and follow it along. I don't recommend missing very often, though, because you can fall behind pretty quick. But that being said, you can find this under Blackboard, under your weekly learning. You'll see the first week is already there. You can just click into the folder. And you'll see the wonderful lesson plan is the first link at the top. Just go ahead and click that. It'll open up. And you've got the lesson plan there. So you know what? I'll do it with you. So we just go through it at the same time. It's a heck of a border there. What is it, F11 to make it? No, it's a Mac. Let's just use the Mac things. Actually, I need F11. It's not F11. Maybe it is F11. Oh, it's function F11. Function F12. None of those things work. All right. Just make the screen bigger so that I don't have the stupid border at the top. That was basically it. But all right. Yeah, so I'm Sean. My education is I went to Georgian, just like you guys, but I took web design and animation back in 2012, graduated in 2014 from that program. Animation was like Flash, which was dead then, but yeah, we did it anyways. I've always been interested more in the programming side of it, so after that I did a little bit of university, about 1 year. Decided I hate math, so I left that. I've been teaching here at Georgian since 2015 in various programs, mostly usually programming programs. JavaScript for the last year and a bit. But before that, I did PHP programming, like teaching PHP programming, bitmap and vector, which is kind of like a graphic design kind of course, and information architecture as well, which are all like different skill sets I have anyways. So yeah, that was a bit about me, but my experience falls into that I've worked at G-Shift. I worked at G-Shift in 2014, then left for a short time, kind of did my own thing, tried to run my own little business for a short while and stuff like that. Worked for a company called Fireside, which was a web development shop. And then now I'm back at G-Shift, actually, which is now known as Mintent because they were acquired. We work primarily in Ruby on Rails. Basically, our application goes and collects data from Google and deals with analytics. We build a platform for marketers, essentially. So marketers can actually use our platform to be able to help their clients. That's basically what I do. I work with, how many of you know Connor? Connor Minley. Yeah, I work with Connor. So yeah, that's a bit about my experience. My personality, I'm very easygoing. Very, very, very easygoing. I'd say the only pet peeve I have is cheating. That's basically it. Other than that, I'm pretty chill. What else? How to communicate with me. This is the big one. Anybody who knows me will tell you that Slack is definitely 100% the quickest way to get a hold of me. Email, 24 to 48 hours, I'll respond on an email. Slack, what, 1 to 2 usually? 1 to 2 hours, sometimes less, sometimes almost immediate. Because I have Slack at work, I have Slack on my tablet, my phone. So the second you Slack me, as long as I'm awake and conscious, then I'll be able to respond back. So Slack is definitely the preferred method. You can actually find the Slack invite link under resources. That link is set to never expire. If you do have an issue connecting to that link, please let me know. I'll send you a personal invite through your email, but most times that link is usually adequate. Okay? So that is definitely the best way to get a hold of me. Cool. Email is like your secondary, and then if you do need one-on-one, the school kind of messed me over a little bit this semester because I work 7 to 3 at Mintent. Then I'm like literally here. So there's like maybe a 45-minute block if you need to actually talk to me face to face. And that applies both to today and on Mondays, except for it's between 4 and 5. So if you need to get a hold of me and you need to talk to me face to face, it'll have to be during that 45-minute period. But for the most part, I find Slack tends to be the best way to talk to me, and it seems to work. Nobody's really complained. So, all right, cool. It is warm in here. Let's talk about what we're actually going to learn. We are going to be learning in this class JavaScript frameworks. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of you have had the Introduction to JavaScript class? Okay, good. Anybody not, just out of curiosity? had never had JavaScript before this? Yeah, but you know JavaScript. Right. But yeah, so the JavaScript frameworks class is going to extend onto what we've learned in JavaScript itself. The idea is now, though, that we're going to be taking a look at using JavaScript actually as a server technology and a database technology, come to think of it. Basically, everything we're going to be doing will involve JavaScript. So no PHP, no Java, no Python, nothing like that. It will all be JavaScript. Yeah.
What's the course code for Intro to JavaScript? Because you know that some of the courses have recently changed their names.
It's Comp 1073. Is that ring a bell? Yeah. This one's Comp 2068.
I don't seem to have a folder for that course.
So you don't think you've taken it before? It was client-side scripting, is what it was called.
Well, apparently client-side scripting, I was not required to take that course.
Well, it's definitely not required for this class. Like, it's suggested by far, because it makes working in JavaScript obviously a lot easier. But based on that, over the next 2 weeks, we'll actually be doing a slight review in JavaScript anyway, so you'll be able to pick up the syntax then. I'm also, my actual course material for Comp 1073, I don't know if I actually threw it in the resources yet. Usually I do. No, I didn't. I'll throw it in the resources. I have the site that I built last semester. I'll load it up, and you're welcome to go through that link, and that will help you kind of catch up. But for the most part, you're going to be learning a lot of it now anyways. And not to mention, I would say, like, oddly enough, that this class is slightly easier than that class. Because a lot of the stuff we're going to be working with are frameworks, and the frameworks do most of the heavy lifting for you. So really, it's just plugging in frameworks, really. So it's not really as difficult as the Intro to JavaScript class, I would say, personally. But you might have a very different opinion. You may riot by the end of this. I don't know. All right. So let's talk first about what actually frameworks are. So frameworks, they're basically existing code structures that you can use, existing libraries, that take fundamental concepts and wrap them for you so that you're not basically reinventing the wheel, right? You implement the framework, and then you utilize the framework to be able to make your jobs a lot easier. That's the idea. And chances are you've already worked with frameworks before. Like, how many of you used Twitter Bootstrap before to do styling? A few of you? Yeah. What about HTML5 boilerplate? If you had Scott's class, you might have touched that one. Those are frameworks, right? WordPress is technically a framework as well. So if you've done any work in WordPress, you've worked with a framework before. A lot of people will automatically assume frameworks, like MVC frameworks, like Rails or Laravel or Symfony or something like that. Frameworks really are just a library that helps make your life a lot easier. The benefits to frameworks, I would have to say though, the benefits to frameworks is usually they're built using best practices, and they help to try to enforce best practices, right? So like if you're using the Rails framework, for example, they try to enforce you to use correct naming conventions. They try to force you to use correct coding practices, which helps you to become a bit better of a programmer as well. Plus, makes building actual applications super, super fast, because frameworks do most of the weight for you, like any of the HTTP stuff or any of the awkward stuff, the complicated stuff. They take a lot of that for you, abstract it away, and make it very simple to work with. Now, the frameworks we'll be using are going to be the JavaScript frameworks, and the 4 that we'll be using in this class is known as the MERN stack. So some teachers, you might have friends in other JavaScript frameworks classes. They might be learning the mean stack, depending on who they have. If they've got Chris, they'll be learning the MERN stack as well. The difference between the MERN stack and the mean stack is the mean stack uses Angular as a front-end technology. We're going to be using React as a front-end technology. And I would argue to say that React is a lot easier to learn. But that being said, it's a good stepping stone so that if you do decide you want to learn Angular, once you know React, learning Angular is not very difficult. The two kind of blend together very well. So the other technologies we'll be doing, Node. Node is our server side. So you guys had PHP, you had ASP, right? Those are server-side technologies. Node will be our server-side technology. It's not a new programming language, it's JavaScript. It's just JavaScript from a server environment. We'll also be taking a look at Express. Express will actually be our thin routing client. It's going to handle all of our HTTP information going in and out. and help direct our traffic and also give a good response back. Don't worry if you don't know what that means yet. You'll be learning it as we go along. And we'll also be taking a look at Mongoose or Mongo. Mongoose is going to be the library that we're going to use to interact with Mongo. Mongo is a document storage database, so it's a NoSQL database. It's actually quite easy to work with, despite like what you may have heard. The cool thing about it, though, is it is JavaScript, essentially. It stores JavaScript objects. So everything we'll be doing is JavaScript, 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 all the way through. The whole cycle will be JavaScript. So it's cool because you're only working in one language. You're not jumping between languages at all. Okay? All right, some other libraries that we'll probably actually incorporate. Twitter Bootstrap, mostly because I'm a lazy styler, so we'll probably use Twitter Bootstrap just to make our lives a little bit easier. So a lot of this will be very hardcore prototyping, but that being said, if you want to actually add more oomph to what we're working with, you're more than welcome to. We'll be using, I don't know if we'll be using TinyMCE. We'll be using a WYSIWYG editor for sure. I'm not sure which one we're going to use yet. It might be SummerNote, because I really like SummerNote, or Farola, or we may use Medium. WYSIWYG editor is, just out of curiosity, how many of you use WordPress, like install a WordPress site or use WordPress? The thing that you create your blogs with, that thing's called a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, is what it stands for. Cool. We'll be using React Router, which will help us to do navigation in the front, because React actually creates a single-page app, so we need some way to be able to navigate between the components. We'll be using bcrypt authentication. And he's wrote or Passport, but I definitely doubt I'm going to do Passport, just because it tends to be quite complicated. Bcrypt is a lot more straightforward and simple to use. And we'll be using the Axios HTTP client. Don't worry if you don't know what that is. Basically, it just allows us to do very easy API calls to the back. That's it. So the example project that we're going to build might be a bit different than the typical example projects that you build. We're going to build a blog, basically. We're going to build a blogging platform where you can add new blogs, you can add new authors, you can create comments, you can create categories, all that type of stuff. The reason why I want to do a blog is because it forces us to work with and have to find solutions for certain challenges that blogs pose. I find the typical products, customer kind of example is too straightforward, and it doesn't give you enough in-depth look, especially when you have to deal with things like relationships in Mongo and stuff like that. This will actually force us to have to deal with things like relationships in Mongo and how we're going to actually work with those things, though it actually is made quite easy using Mongoose. Cool. Any questions about the above stuff we've talked about? No? All right. This is the overview for the next 14 weeks. This is also in the syllabus as well. So you're welcome to take a look at it in the syllabus. Obviously, today will be intros and a little bit of JavaScript review. We'll just do some quick, very, very quick JavaScript. Only a few of you, I think, weren't in the last semester. Some of you haven't been here for at least 4 months because you were in co-op. So I imagine a review would be helpful. So we'll do a quick JavaScript review. After that, that's basically it for today. But next week, we'll be doing our first little Node application. We're going to create a simple Node server and deploy that to Heroku. Heroku is my host of choice just because it's simply free. It does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It builds out your application for you, installs all the libraries that you need and stuff like that, so it makes things a little simpler. And obviously, we're going to use that in conjunction with GitHub. And plus, it's also quite, I would have to say it's like one of the industry standards that are out there, like next to AWS. So I think it's definitely worthwhile for you to learn something like Heroku. That being said, I'm not married to you having to use Heroku. If you want to use Azure or you're rolling your own host, that's totally fine too. I'm completely flexible if you do you. All right. What I don't want, though, is there's the code sandbox. I don't want projects or labs handed in using the code sandbox because, I mean, that doesn't show me you understand the deploy process or anything like that. It just shows me you know how to put code on code sandbox. I want you to make sure that you're using a host, whether that's Azure, Spark, Heroku, or AWS. That would be impressive. Use AWS. But yeah, I want to go that route. Okay? Cool. Then the following week, we're going to be doing MVC stuff. We're basically going to roll out a home page, an about page, and a contact page so that you understand how the view, controller, and model system works. We're going to look at the application flow and how view, model, and controller works. You guys did MVC last semester, I'm assuming, with ASP. And then you probably touched on MVC a little bit in your PHP class. Yeah. So this, we're going to take a look at it pretty nitty-gritty, though. We're going to get very granular with it so that you fully understand how MVC works. And between those 3 classes, you should be able to walk out of here and pick up Rails and jump right into Rails, for that matter. It shouldn't matter because you should kind of have a basic understanding of what the architecture looks like. And at that point, it's just really learning syntax, right? Which will make you super powerful programmers, which is awesome. Cool. And then the following week, we'll be into MongoDB and Mongoose and models and getting into all that fancy fun stuff. That's going to take 2 weeks to go through because we're going to build our CRUD system. So create and read in the first week and update and delete in the second week. Then we'll be doing the basic authentication strategy. And then it'll be the midterm. And that whole 6-week block will just be Node. That's all we'll be doing for 6 weeks, working in Node, working on the server side of it. Then, after the break, after your reading week, we'll come back, and then we'll start our React. So the 6 week will be in React. That'll be introducing React, working at keeping it dry in React. Does anybody remember what dry means? Exactly. Don't repeat yourself. Working with React and Node.js. So we're actually going to turn our Node.js application into an API, and then we're going to use React to communicate with the API. So you'll get that whole kind of programming paradigm, which is cool to add to your belt. That'll take 2 weeks to do. Then we'll be looking at authentication in React, which will really just be authenticating with our Node app. And then we'll be taking a look at integrating our WYSIWYG, whatever WYSIWYG it is that we decide to choose by that point. If you have one that you particularly like maybe Gutenberg or something like that, just let me know and we'll implement that. We will try to get it so that we can put up images, but I find images is kind of a time-consuming process. But we will try. We'll try to get it so that we can actually put a featured image in our blog. That'll be our goal, hopefully. And hopefully we'll get there. Any questions about the next 14 weeks? Obviously, those 14 weeks are subject to change based on how class flow is going, how far we're making it along, whether or not we're speeding along, or whether we're kind of halting a bit, right? You guys are lucky you don't have any holidays during that time because our class lands on a Thursday. The Monday class misses 3 classes in total. So because of that, your class is actually going to be kind of facilitating their class because I'll be recording the lesson in this class, and then they'll watch that lesson on that Monday. That way they don't have to slow down either, and they still get the full 14 weeks of actual, lessons. Okay, let's talk about the gradables. Obviously, gradables are things I grade, right? It's not a real word, just so you know. Autocorrect, like the flares up on it. These are subject to change as well, just based on how bogged down we get. If I find that we're just getting kind of overwhelmed, I usually cut from in-class quizzes and labs is usually where I do most of my gutting if anything's going to happen. But I will try to stay persistent with it because I kind of like this. The only thing on here, actually there's 2 things on here that will be individual, are the in-class quizzes and the first part of any test, which will be a question-based part. Everything else is suggested group work. And the key word there is suggested. Okay? So you do not have to work in a group. That is totally up to you, so don't get anxious about it. You do you, right? But if you want to work in a group, you can. That is totally fine up to 4 people. And that goes for the labs. That also goes for the project. The project is worth 40% of your total grade. It'll be broken into 2 parts, though. So there'll be a 20% part and then a 20% part. Okay? So let's talk about that. So the in-class quizzes, they'll be presented at the beginning of every class. So next week, you'll have an in-class quiz, which will cover the review part. All right? And that's just, you do it on your own. It's open for a full 24 hours. So whatever if you don't get to it in the morning, say you're late, and you don't get here on time, so you lose the in-class time to do it, don't panic. Just do it that evening. Review the material. Make sure you get it done before the next day. That's all. Each lab will actually be demonstration of a complete concept. So there's only 5 labs in total, but they'll make up a total of 20%. So each lab will be worth 2.5%. Basically what 2%. No, that's not right math. 4%. There we go. 4%. It's been a very long day. All right, so each one will make up 4%. The first one will be our simple node and server and deploying it. So that'll be actually not due next week, but the following week. So you got a couple of weeks grace period, which is nice. Then lab 2 will be our create and read in Mongo. Our update and delete will be lab 3. And then we'll be into React stuff after that. So you'll only have 3 labs between now and then, plus the first part of your project. Okay. The project will be broken into 2 parts. There'll be a Node.js part, and there will be a React.js part. Next week, I will have the requirements posted. But this is where this class, like I find this kind of shines. People love this kind of idea. The project is completely open-ended. It just needs to be a CRUD system that's going to involve Node and React. So I've had this question before from students in the past saying, we don't ever get a chance to just practice or think outside the box or learn a little bit more. It's always this rigid kind of structure. This project is not a rigid structure. It's totally open to you. If you decide you want to start working on your startup idea because you have a startup idea that you want to build, take advantage of this project to do that, right? Obviously, it has to be in JavaScript. That's the one downfall. But yeah, take advantage of this. It just has to be a CRUD system. I'll post the requirements next week. That'll give you an idea. I will post some suggestions, though, obviously, to help you out in case you're the kind of person that's like, I really don't know what to build. So I'll post some suggestions as well that you can obviously do. But for the most part, I want you to have fun with it. And if you're building it with 4 people, yeah, definitely have a lot of fun with it, right? Try to see if it can make you some money or something. Cool. The second half will be taking the first half. So this will be one little bit of a hiccup. Any of your views that you'll have in your Node components will have to get switched out to React components. Come on in, Angela. We'll get switched out with React components. That being said, though, I'll probably make it so that you can just give me a Node API, and then I'll just use Postman and hit your API. And as long as I can hit your API, we're cool. And then you can use React to do your actual view side. All right? I'll post the whole project, so all the requirements. So if you want to bang out the whole project before next term, that's totally fine. If you have a strong understanding of React already, then yeah, go nuts. You work at your pace on that project. The first half of the project will be due in week 6. The second half of the project will be due in week 13. That's basically how that will go. The test, as I said before, will be broken into 2 components. There'll be a 1-hour question component, which will be on Blackboard. Obviously, that'll be individual. You'll go through all the questions, answer them out, right? Submit it when you're ready, and then that'll be it. After that hour, you just basically take a hike for a little bit until the 2-hour mark comes. And then in that 2-hour point, you will get into your groups that you were in before, and you will do the practical component. So yes, the test is group-based. So you don't have to be in a group. Obviously, the test will be geared towards an individual, but you can be in a group, which is totally awesome. I would recommend getting in a group. Step out of your shell. When you leave here and you go get jobs, you'll be working with other people, so you might as well get used to that now. All right. Any questions about any of the gradables? Cool. If you do have questions and you're just not keen on saying them right now, again, Slack. Send me a Slack message and I will happily answer your question, okay? Let's talk about expectations. And after this section, we will take a break. I need some water. My God, it's dry in here. Class etiquette. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory, right? Be respectful to me, other students. Don't talk when I'm talking. Don't talk when other students are talking. That way, everybody can get heard. Nobody's kind of fighting over the sound. Be on time. I always start 2 minutes past the hour. Always. Always start 2 minutes past the hour. It seems to be like the golden number. That's like, I'm only ever 2 minutes late. People seem to only ever be 2 minutes late. So it seems to work out for me. So I always start 2 minutes past the hour. I ask that you participate in class discussions because obviously helps me kind of learn who you are, get familiar with you, right? Learn your name, that kind of thing. Helps me to identify you as a competent colleague, helps your colleagues identify you as a competent colleague. And it also makes the 3 hours go a little bit quicker because it's not just me talking, right? And like I said, you guys know Connor. The reason why Connor is working at Mid-Tent is because Connor was fresh in my brain when my boss said, hey, we need to hire a JavaScript developer. And I was like, yeah, that's Connor. Connor is a JavaScript developer. And then we hired Connor. So definitely being fresh in somebody's mind at any point, even your colleagues, if they know who you are and they kind of know your skill set, it can really benefit you in getting employment in the future or even a better job than you're currently working now, right? So it's definitely worth your time. I also ask that you complete the in-class examples. Obviously, it's not a requirement. Maybe you're like, I hate blogs. I'm not completing the blog. That's totally your prerogative. You do what you want. You're adults. But I recommend completing the in-class examples. Well, Node is definitely easier to program in. There's so many moving parts, like so many moving parts. It's very modular. There's a lot of little pieces and components. MVC right there, right? 3 moving parts at least, models, views, and controllers, right? Plus our routing, plus all of our actual utility libraries, plus our node modules, and all this. This adds up. There's quite a bit of stuff. So there's quite a bit of little things that you need to remember, or at least know what to look for, or at least remember their titles. So working with the in-class examples will definitely help you be more successful, obviously, in this class. Group work requirements. For those of you that actually want to do groups, I find most people do groups just because it's way simpler. You're going to sign up by entering your group information into the group document. So I don't have a group document for you yet. That one that's posted, you know what? Just use the one that's posted. That's totally fine. No, don't. I'll flip that out, actually, because that's Mondays, so I don't want like a mixture of people in there. It'll be difficult to separate you out. All right, I'll post it. We have a couple weeks before you need to actually figure out what your group's going to be. But you'll sign up in the group form. I will actually put your group directly into Blackboard as a proper group. So that way when I give you a mark, the mark goes to the group, and it's not me trying to figure out who is in your group and then forgetting or missing, and that person loses marks because of that. And then there's like that whole catch-up piece. It's just annoying. It's much easier to put you into Blackboard as an actual group. But in order to do that, I obviously need to know your groups ahead of time. So I think it'll be much easier if I just create you a Google Doc, you enter in your groups in the Google Doc, and then I'll enter those into Blackboard. And then whenever you get a mark for a lab project or the test, it will automatically distribute and disperse properly. That being said, obviously group-based assignments always have their little kind of drama with them. So what I am asking for is that there's a group assessment. I will provide you the link for it. There's an online anonymous group assessment application thingy where you basically go, you enter your group, well, you choose your group, and then you choose the member of your group and you enter in anonymously a score from 1 to 5 or whatever, right? And then you can also add in reasons. So that'll be up online as well, and that will be required. Group members are required to be equal contributors. That basically means that I don't expect 2 members to build the whole application while 2 other members just do absolutely nothing. Obviously, that is a definite reason to come talk to me because everybody needs to be an equal contributor. That being said, too, even if you shine at something like design and you're kind of pushing the programming off to your buddies, I really recommend you just like stop your role, take over some programming, and get that experience in place. So that way, you know, you're not euchred in the future. It's definitely worth your time to do some of the programming. And I will be actually assessing that when you actually state what each member of your group did. Obviously, I'm going to want to see programming from every single member. So, because styling, this is not a design class, right? So, whole idea is for you to learn JavaScript frameworks. Cool. What else? You're not required to work in a group, but like I said, it's recommended. Group dynamics, disagreements, conflicts, etc. obviously can occur. I recommend it to be dealt in this format. So obviously attempt to resolve it with your group. You know, sometimes it works out where you have 2 strong personalities and then you got one guy who just makes an awesome mediator. So make that person a mediator and let them kind of try to figure it out. Worst comes to worst, do a vote, right? Just hold a vote and see who votes for what idea. And then last, absolute last, involve me only if you can't get the other 2 pieces to work. And then hopefully I can help you out with whatever the issue is and provide you a better solution.
Are you talking about group work requirements or misconduct?
Group work requirements. I haven't hit misconduct yet.
I'm just trying to drop down some notes.
None of this is going to be on a test.
Right, well, I'm really nervous. If you have some time at the end of this lecture, I'd like to help you.
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. All right, group members found not communicating working can be ejected from a group only after a discussion with me. Don't be like, you're out, dude. Get out of Riverdale, kind of thing. You need to talk to me first. All right, misconduct. Let's talk about the misconduct stuff. I've definitely taken a stronger stance than most of you would remember with misconduct for this semester. So I'm kind of following what the college book says now. I used to just basically zero it out. If I caught you cheating, I zeroed it out. If I caught you, if it was one question that you had cheated on, I zeroed it out. I'm changing that mostly because I have gotten feedback from other students, and they kind of feel like the college's approach is definitely a much better solution. So, due to the overwhelming amount of misconduct that has been occurring recently, my misconduct rules have changed and they've become a lot stricter. Basically, how you can identify if you've committed misconduct. So some people are like, well, how do I know I've actually committed misconduct? If you copied a solution in whole or even in part from the internet and then submitted it as your own work, that's misconduct, right? If you've copied a solution in whole or part from a friend or a colleague or whatever, that is also misconduct. If you give your work to another student and they hand that in as their work, that's misconduct for both parties. Okay, so be careful of that because that can happen on occasion where you're trying to help somebody out and they kind of stab you in the back and hand in your assignment as theirs, right? So be cautious of that. If you communicated to colleagues during a quiz or test who have not taken the quiz or test, so say Thursday talks to Monday's class or Monday's class talks to Thursday's class, that is considered misconduct, just so you're aware. Not that it should be a problem because the questions will be different and the actual practical will be different. Yes, Mike.
The only thing is it's like a gray area, right? Where like with coding, like if you're looking up, how would I go about doing something like this?
100%.
I mean, it's going to be similar in some way. Right?
That is true. That is true. There is a very distinct difference between
straight up copy.
looking at an idea and copying and pasting it in place. Yeah. Usually the copy and paste in place just doesn't work because they didn't understand what it was doing. Yeah. And most times that I have that happen, I've never had it where it's only been like, that's different because that's a concept usually, right? It's a concept that you're trying to encapsulate. What I find is it's usually the whole bloody application is pasted in, hope that it works, and then they submit it for marks and it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything, and it's very obvious that it's usually copied. Yeah. Cool. So what happens if you actually commit misconduct? So you'll fill out a misconduct form with me and we'll both be humiliated and it'll be terrible for both of us. The registrar's office will be contacted to see if you've committed misconduct before. That's kind of a bad thing because if you have committed misconduct before and you get caught a second time, then that's an ejection from the course. If you've been caught 3 times, that's ejection from the actual college program, and you'll have to reapply for the whole program. So I really recommend don't commit misconduct. I always catch it. Well, I probably don't always catch it, but I do catch it. It happens. Let's see. I'll leave that for you guys, though. Why do I care if you commit misconduct? Because some people, I think that is a valid question. I think people actually ask that. How do you get that? But the reason why I care is because I work in this industry, and I'm watching the value of this industry slowly go like this, right? So what it's actually worth. Web development is going in this direction. It's not going in this direction, the direction I want it to go in, right? The actual value is going down. And part of that has to do with colleges and universities releasing students who don't actually know what they're doing, and they're starting with small startups who are trying to run lean. And you can imagine being a startup owner, right? You hire a student at $60K to start. They start with you. They know absolutely nothing. You're putting all this money into them, training them and everything else, and they know absolutely nothing, and then you wind up having to let them go. Then you get a new student, right? And you try the whole same process again. Only this time you're getting a little agitated because at $60K a year, that is a ton of money to be dumping into somebody that you're basically teaching from the ground up, right? So the next time you hire that student, now you're doing it at $40K because there's no way you're going to waste that kind of money on a brand new student from a college if you can't trust that they actually know what they're doing. So I feel like it cheapens our industry by putting people out who don't actually have any concept of what programming is or what they actually have any capacity of being able to do it. It reflects poorly on Georgian College as well as a credible school. So obviously when we put people out who can't do the work, that definitely devalues Georgian College, and then people are going to start looking at your credentials and going, hey, I'm not going to hire you because you've got your education from Georgia College, and the last 3 students I hired from Georgian College couldn't do the work, right? That kind of thing. And it also shows you're a student who doesn't deserve the position you've received. There's actually, it's the first time I've seen this in the last 2 years, but this course has become competitive, where there's actually a lot of difficulty for people to get in and get registered because we're registering almost 8 classes per year. So there's a huge demand, especially with now reaching out internationally to different countries. It's making it very difficult to be here. So I kind of feel like if all you're going to do is cheat your way through, then why are you here, right? Like there's really no purpose for you to be here. So I'd rather have somebody who actually wants to put the effort in and actually work on it. Cool. Any questions about the misconduct stuff? No? Awesome. Let's talk quickly about the projected class structure. This is obviously subject to change. Most of our classes will be just interactive. We'll basically come in, do our review, do our quiz, and then we'll be knee-deep into our example project that we're going to be building, because most of the examples are going to teach you whatever it is that we're learning for that day. That being said, though, every day we'll also be introduced to what the actual learning outcome is for that day. We'll try to attempt a simple activity or a small lecture about the learning objective. Otherwise, we'll be into the actual example code right out the get-go. Any questions about any of that? Cool.
So how many breaks are there?
2. Usually 2. If you require 1, then you can always ask me. We're usually allotted 20 minutes in the way of breaks. 20 minutes to a half hour, and I only ever do a half hour if I find that we're really struggling along. All right, so our example project. So this is what it's going to look like in depth, broken down week by week. Obviously this week it's not going to have anything to do with the example project. Next week we'll start by setting up our node server and quickly deploying that node server to Heroku. So we'll basically have our Express in there. We'll have our basic pieces that we need, and we'll deploy that up. So we're going to learn a little bit about NPM, which is our package manager. We're going to learn about how Node deals with requests, and we're going to learn a little bit about how Express deals with requests. Okay? Not a ton of stuff, basically more because the time I find it takes to actually get that onto GitHub and deployed to Heroku takes a generally good hour and a half, like on average, because people will have issues and stuff. Some of those issues we're going to iron out tonight because we will be installing Node tonight, so, which will be good. Then the following week, we're going to create our basic routes, views, and controllers. So no models in the third week. We're going to create a home page, an about page, and a contact page. We may even throw a Google map on it. I'm not sure yet. Creating the logic in the 4th week for adding a new author and draft blog posts. Actually, most of our create and read operations are going to be done then. Often, I will provide you the forms in HTML because you've already had HTML classes. Has anybody not had an HTML class before? Does anybody not know what HTML is? Okay. So a lot of the HTML, wait, did you put up your ammo?
Yeah, but I did that.
Right. Makes it so much better when you explain it. All right, so we're going to basically, I will provide you a lot of the HTML stuff for you. However, that being said, when we do the, next week, when we do the about page, home page, and contact page, because we're going to be using JSX, which is a templating language for HTML, we'll learn JSX in that class, which literally takes like 5 minutes to learn. It's so fast and easy to work with. All right. Cool. Adding user authentication will be in the 6th week. The 7th week, which will be after the break and after reading week, we'll take all our existing views that we have, and we'll be converting those over to React components and start working with React. That'll happen in week 7 and 8. Week 9, we'll be converting our Node.js app to API only. Week 10, we'll be creating a commenting and rating system. That is subject to change, but likely that will be what happens. And then 11, we'll be creating authentication on the React side using JWT plus our Node's authentication system. And then in week 12, we'll be converting our blogging block, like the little text area where you actually write your blog out, to a WYSIWYG editor so that you can actually, have H1s and stuff like that. Cool. Any questions about the example project? No? Styling and presentation. To simplify styling, we'll be using, obviously, Twitter's Bootstrap. I'll also give you a copy of It may even be a paid copy. Font Awesome, which will allow you to have some icons for your actual application. We'll probably use list.js for sorting and sorting and filtering, because building a sorting and filtering system actually takes quite a bit of work. We will use select2 for any cool select boxes if we decide to do tagging. And then we'll be using a date picker, probably Bootstrap date picker, I haven't decided yet, for our scheduled published dates. Because we will actually be scheduling published dates as well, which means this example project should be fully functional, and you should be able to use it even outside of this as an actual project if you decide to. Cool. That's it. Let's take a break. But before we do that, does anybody have any questions about the example project that's coming that we'll be working on? No? Awesome. You guys are pretty quiet today. It's Thursday. It's not Friday. All right. Let's, you know what? Let's take 15 minutes because we actually kind of rocked through that pretty fast. So let's take 15 minutes and then we'll regroup.
You have a USB-C?
Do I have a USB-C? So we're going to do JavaScript review. So we're going to review some JavaScript concepts we learned last semester. Just some basic stuff. Some good things that you guys will be happy about. We're not doing any prototyping. So there will be no prototype method that you'll have to type out. We'll actually be using ES6 classes, which you guys should be very familiar with. We did that in Java. So it should make things a little simpler. However, there are some difficult things. So you remember callbacks, your most favorite thing of all time. We're going to be doing a ton of those. However, I'm going to teach you a very easy way to deal with callbacks called async and await. And once you learn async and await, you'll be super happy. You'll all be glowing. You'll be just like, yay! So hopefully that'll make things a little simpler. The nice thing about Node and React is that we can use ES6, which is a standardization around JavaScript. We can use all its wonderful, easy-to-use technologies because Node will actually transpile that out. It just interprets it correctly. And React will transpile it for us into crappy, old-school, horrible, hard-to-use JavaScript. Right? So that's one of the reasons why this type of class, the JavaScript Frameworks class, is a little simpler than working in native JavaScript. But your skill set in native JavaScript doesn't go gone, right? It actually still will apply and help you out. All right, so we're going to be talking about introducing Node.js. So in 2008, Google announced their V8 JavaScript engine. And I think I mentioned this in the semesters that you guys have with me for Intro to JavaScript, that each browser actually handles JavaScript differently. They all have their own individual rendering JavaScript engine. So in Google, it's V8. In Safari, it's Nitro. In Firefox, it's Scorpion? SpiderMonkey. In Internet Explorer, it's Microsoft garbage. But Chrome, they use V8. And actually, V8 also powers Node for us. So we actually get the power of the V8 engine, which takes your JavaScript, compiles it right down directly to machine code. So like immediately from JavaScript to machine code, which makes it super fast. And we get that right on the server in our Node.js library, which is pretty awesome. So they developed this thing, V8's V8, right? And the V8, the whole idea of using it actually as a server-side technology was to take the wonderful asynchronous efficiency of JavaScript from the client and now pull it into a server-side technology, right? Because you don't get that. You don't get asynchronicity with PHP. You don't get it with Ruby. You don't get it with C# or ASP, depending, like if you're using C# with ASP. And you don't get it with Java. What you can get with those technologies is threading. But threading is a lot more difficult than asynchronicity that's built right directly into JavaScript and works out of the box, right? They are different, though. They work differently. Threading actually causes operations to happen in parallel to each other. So if I call a function, literally on the same microsecond, they will execute at the same time, right? Whereas asynchronicity basically will take one of those functions and shove it in the event buffer. When this one is stalling and waiting for something, it will call this one, and allow it to execute, and then check back with this one when this one stalls, right? But that asynchronicity allows our code to run a lot more efficiently. The other very, very awesome thing about Node is from like a startup perspective, if you're working for a startup, it is a cheap technology to scale. It's very cheap. Ruby and PHP, they require you to throw more resources at them in order to scale them. So now, if you want to have more users, you got to be able to provide more workers, which means more RAM, more processors, more memory, and you got to feed it more resources because it's just a hungry beast that wants more resources from you. Whereas Node likes to live nice and lean, right? And because of the asynchronicity, it can hire a higher bandwidth of users. It can handle a higher bandwidth of users and requests due to the asynchronous nature of Node. So it's very cheap to scale. It's a good technology to use if you're trying to build a startup because it's cheap, super cheap. All right. So that and other optimizations made JavaScript a viable programming language capable of executing completely complex tasks, right? So Chrome took the V8 engine, Google took the V8 engine, wrapped it in solid C code, and then created the first Node version. Node uses the event-driven nature of JavaScript, which I just explained. JavaScript is an event-driven language, which means like the clicks that you're used to the user doing, right? Instead of the clicks and hovers and stuff like that we treated as events, now we're looking at requests as events, like get requests, post requests. Those become our events. So all that gets now incorporated into Node. So once the event is actually emitted, we can execute a chunk of code for it, just like you guys learned with event-driven when we took the clicks and hovers and all that type of stuff, and we fired off functions to it. So this concept allows you to seamlessly execute asynchronous code without blocking the rest of the program. Now, I have a cool little video. I use the word cool very loosely. But it's got a really nice song. I love the intro song to this thing. It's really awesome. Here, I'll just let you watch it. That's loud. We need an event to programming starting from the top. Better write some code so the work doesn't stop. Love the little diddly between. Oh god, yeah. Ding.
Hello, I'm Greg College, and you're watching Real-Time Web with Node.js. In this level, we're going to give you a quick introduction to Node, talk about what it is, what it isn't, blocking, non-blocking, what event programming is, and then finally what that event loop is that we adopt with Node. So let's jump into it. Node.js allows you to build scalable network applications using JavaScript on server side. Underneath the covers of Node, you're going to find the V8 JavaScript runtime. This is the same runtime that is used in your Chrome browser on your client side. What Node does is provides a wrapper around this entity, providing additional functionality for building network applications. It's really fast. Why is it fast? Well, if you look under the covers of Node and this runtime, you find it's all that you can see. Obviously, it's very fast. So what can you build with Node? Well, here's a couple of examples. You can build a WebSocket server. So a good example of this is going to be a chat server where you have your browser, lots of browsers connecting to the server, and there's chat going on, and you're sending messages back and forth between the client and the server. The socket stays open. You can also do a file upload client. When you think about uploading big, large files, you want to be able to do it in a way that's not blocking. So you do more than one file at a time, and maybe even start processing the file as you get the first few pieces of it. Also, you can create ad server. When you think about ads that get served on web pages all over the net, they need to be really fast. These are maybe images that are appearing on other people's websites, and they need to be able to be rapid and quick across the network. Also, any real-time data apps. So not just from on the internet, not just from the browser to the server, but any sort of network server, use a mobile network server, would be a good fit for Node.js. Node.js is not a web framework. It's not going to replace Rails. It's not going to replace Django. It's very low-level network communication we're talking about here. There are libraries that people have written that sit on top of Node to be a web framework, but Node is most basic Node is also not for beginners because we are talking about network communication. Node is also not a multi-thread application. When we write our applications with Node, we write them as if we're dealing with a single-threaded server. Before we get into some actual Node code, we need to make sure everybody knows the difference between blocking code and non-blocking code. Here's the pseudocode principle. First, we want to read the file from the file system, so equal to the contents variable, print the contents variable, and then do something else. If we think about how this code executes, first, we read from the file system. We can't actually print out the contents until we've read out all the contents from the file, so it's kind of blocking it. And then, obviously, we can do something else. What would a non-blocking version of this code look like? Well, we might read the file from the file system. Whenever we're complete with that, print out the contents of the file, and then finally do something else. That technique there, saying when you're complete, do this, we call a callback. We're going to call back that function once the file is done reading. Executing the pseudocode might go like this, where we read the file from the file system. We might do something else, so it's simply going to continue on, and then at any point in time in the future, when it's done reading the file, it's going to print the contents. So here's an actual Node code. First of all, the blocking version of reading the file might look like this, where we're getting all the contents of the file, we're then logging that out, and then doing something else. So obviously, when it's executed, it just runs one at a time. The non-blocking version of this Node is going to call read file. And look at this. We're actually sending in a function as a second parameter to read file. That's our callback. And when we get the contents, log the contents. And then we can start doing something else. So when we execute this, as we mentioned, it's going to start reading the file. It's then going to continue execution. And when it's done reading the file, it's going to print out the contents at some point in the future. Hopefully this JavaScript syntax looks familiar. And there's another way we could write this, which would be just fine. We could declare the function and set that equal to the variable. And then, when we call read file, we could send that function into read file. Either syntax would work just fine. It would do the same thing. Let's take a closer look at this code. And let's see what happens when we're reading two files at the same time. First of all, if we had to do this in a blocking way, we look at this timeline. If this was blocking, we would read one file and then the next file. However, since our code is non-blocking, if we read two files at the same time, we're going to read in parallel. Now it's time for our Node.js Hello World, or in our case, let's do Hello Doc. So our first line in this file, we need to apply the HTTP modules. Including a library. This is how we include libraries in Node. We're going to call the create server function. That function takes as its single parameter a callback with request and response. We're then going to write a 200 status code in the header for the response. We're going to write out the response body. And then finally, we're going to end the response connection. We want our server to listen on port 8080. And then to ensure our server is running, we're simply going to log out listening on port 8080. To run the server on our command line, we're going to see that it prints out listening on port 8080. And then if we use the curl command line tool to hit the server, it's going to return to us hello stop. We can also just call up our browser and go to that port and we get the same result. Now let's talk a little bit about how Node executes this code. The first time we go through this code and execute it, Node is going to register the event. In this case, we're registering the request event, so we have a request comes in. Once it gets done executing the script, Node goes into something called an event loop. It's checking for events continuously. The request come in, the request come in, the request come in. As soon as the request comes in, it's going to trigger that event, and it's going to run the callback that we wrote in our hello, this is Doc. And you might be wondering, why are we writing JavaScript? Well, the creator of Node, Ryan Dahl, wrote this really good quote. He's trying to explain why. I'll let you read it. So JavaScript makes it really easy for us to program in an evented way, to do evented programming using that event loop, and write code that is potentially non-blocking. When we run a Node application, like you said, it registers a bunch of events, like request, connection, or close. And those events, sometimes you can trigger even more events. And then we have this event loop, which is constantly looking for events. And once your application gets into that event loop, it can start triggering and emitting events into what we might call our event queue. So if a request event comes in at the same time as a close event, well, those are going to be processed one at a time on our event loop. Let's make our hello world code a little bit more complex and simulate a longer loop process. So here we're creating our server, we write the status code back to the response, we write this running. Now we're going to do a timeout. We're going to pause for about 5 seconds to simulate a long running process. Once that timeout is done, we're going to write out this done to the response and end the response. We're going to pause for 5 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds, and listen unfortunately. You might notice here there are 2 different events in our code. We have the request event, which you should be familiar with from earlier, and we also have a timeout event. So every time a request comes in, it's going to create a new event, a timeout event, which will then be called back in 5 seconds. We're going to send in 2 requests to our Hello World server with a timeout and see what happens. So the first request comes in, triggers that request event, the request callback executes, that sent timeout registers, and it's going to wait 5 seconds. Meanwhile, another request comes in, triggers that request event again, the callback executes, the set timeout registers, and now this has to wait 5 seconds. Then when our first timeout is done, it's going to trigger that set timeout event, it will trigger the set timeout callback, and returns that response. Then our second request is going to trigger the event, and the callback, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, 2 requests can happen at the same time, and nothing is blocked. What would this look like, though, if that set timeout was blocked? Well, let's try it. The request comes in, the request callback executes, and the set timeout blocks the world, and it stops the world. And nothing else can execute on this process while we are on a timeout. It is officially blocked. So if a request tries to come in, well, it just has to wait for the server to get unblocked. Once it is unblocked, it will trigger the timeout event, and so on and so forth. And the second request gets to block the server again. Obviously, blocking is bad. And you might be wondering, why would anybody write a programming language or a framework that blocks and stops the world? Well, you find this in a lot of programming languages. Often when you do a call out to web services, it will block. When you're doing a read or write to a database, it will block. Or when you're calling out to a C extension, it will block. And this is one of the reasons why people love Node.js. Because from the very start with Node, its purpose was to be completely non-blocking, and all of the libraries for content Node are all non-blocking. Well, we've reached the end of level 1. It's time to get your hands dirty in the challenges. We'll see you at level 2.
So when we look at languages like C, right, C++, languages you guys use like Java and C Sharp, which you guys use C Sharp for ASP.NET or Objective-C, or what do you use? C Sharp, yeah. So C Sharp or even PHP, Ruby, these are all blocking languages. Now when you use them in a web environment, like PHP in a web environment, obviously you might be asking the question, well, like, PHP powers so much of the web. If it was totally blocking, how can so many people access a website at the same time? And the reason is because we can spin up multiple processes to handle those requests in order to handle them individually. But they're still being handled individually, and there's still a cap, right? And that's how we get things like DOS attacks, right? Because people actually try to kind of counteract that attack, or counteract the capacity, and they basically overload the server with workers, and it winds up just causing the whole thing to crap out. So JavaScript tries to mitigate that whole issue by being like, cool, we can have multiple processes, but we don't really need them because we can use event-driven to kind of just not lock up. So when a person requests a page, yeah, I can send you the image, but while that image is sending to you, I'm ready to now send this off to the next request. So it can kind of handle them all at once. It doesn't have to handle them individually, complete the complete request before it's done, before it moves on to the next one, nor does it need to spin up another worker or any other processes to do that. So JavaScript's really, really super fast. And when you marry it with something like Lambdas or something like that in AWS, it becomes even faster because now your system can actually scale out as needed to as big as it needs to be, because not only does it run asynchronously, but when you marry it with something like Lambda, Lambda will actually spin up multiple Lambdas to be able to handle more events happening at the same time, which is very, very, very awesome. And it makes it nice and cheap and scalable. So Node is obviously what we're going to be learning. And I think our first step would obviously be installing it, right? Because we can't do much without it on our systems. So let me scroll to where we actually do that. Cool. So it's right underneath the introducing there. I have installing Node. The link isn't in there, which feels like a kind of a missed opportunity on my part. But it is sitting underneath the weekly learning folder. So if you go to lesson 1 to the weekly learning, let me open it up here. Boom. Under week 1, you'll see the Node.js download link. And that'll take you to this page. Obviously, download the one for your system. Now, if you're curious which one you need, 32-bit or 64-bit, unless your computer is like 15 years old, please download 64-bit. Or you're rocking a 32-bit operating system, which you would have had to install. So. Once you have it downloaded, feel free to execute the installation. There is one spot that you need to be aware of. There is an option to add Node to your path, and it is selected for you by default. Do not, I repeat, do not uncheck that, because it's a real pain in the butt to have to go through your environment variables and add it for you. So make sure you don't uncheck that. The idea of that is the reason why you want it added to your path is that when you open up your command prompt, PowerShell, terminal, whatever it is you're using, you want to be able to just type Node. You don't want to have to type in /home/bin/node blah in order to actually use Node every time. You want to make sure it's added to your path. All right? Might take a few seconds. On Monday, it took like 10 minutes for everybody to get it and get it installed. Now, a good part of this course is using our actual terminal and command prompts, right? So if you're on Mac, like Noor or me, you're going to be using terminal. If you are on Windows, you'll likely be using command prompt. Now, if you have Windows 10, you have an option to use PowerShell. There's an application on your system called PowerShell. And the cool thing about PowerShell is PowerShell actually takes Linux commands. So the same commands I'm going to be typing on my Mac will be the exact same commands you'll type in PowerShell, which might make your lives a little bit easier. Those of you who are not really comfortable with PowerShell, you're welcome to use command prompt. And I will try to give you the Windows commands, but I tend to forget them because I don't type them all that often. I use Linux at work, I use Unix for the school, so it's not very often I actually use Windows. But I did just teach it on Monday, so I probably still remember most of them. But we'll try to do that. Node is really the only thing we're going to be using today. No GitHub or anything like that. We're not going to be installing any other applications, so this is it. Now, with your Node installation, you're going to get a few other cool things like npm. And I think Node actually also installs with a terminal called Node Terminal. Don't worry about using that, though. Just use regular command prompt. Out of curiosity, just so I'm fully aware, does anybody not know what command prompt or terminal or any of those type of things mean and have never touched it? No? You guys have all used command prompt at some point. Okay, cool. Yeah, just a little bit. That's fine. That's totally fine. You haven't had to use it a lot. We're going to actually run through some very basic commands inside command prompt and terminal so that you can navigate around inside there. And it's really not that difficult to actually navigate because all of them support drag and drop, which is kind of nice, except for PowerShell. I couldn't get drag and drop to work in PowerShell. But we'll see if we can get it to work in everything else. Okay. Is anybody still installing? Yeah, just one? Okay. Everybody else, go ahead and open up your terminal or command prompt or PowerShell. Even you can open up command prompt, terminal, or PowerShell. Actually, no, that's not true. Wait till your Node installation's done. Otherwise, you'll have to reopen it. Yeah? Well, we're going to find out right now, actually. So the way we're going to find this out, and let me zoom in so we can actually see my screen here. So I'm using a Mac, so I'm using terminal. That's what my terminal looks like. The little tilde you see there, that little curly line, that's my personal home directory. That's where I am. If you want to know where you currently are in your terminal, if you're on Windows, you type dir. So just dir and hit enter, and it will tell you where you are. If you're on Mac or PowerShell, you're going to type pwd, and that will tell you where you are. So as you can see, I'm under my users account. You guys are likely, if you're in Windows, you should be under users and whoever your name is. Actually, I think it goes home users, doesn't it?
C users.
C users? Yeah, so you'll be under C users.
I'm just
And your
under
name.
C.
Oh, cool, you're right at the root. Yeah. Now, incidentally, the cool thing about the terminals and PowerShells and command prompts, if you ever need to get back to that directory where you start from, you just type in cd and hit enter, and it will put you right back in that directory. So if you get lost, cd, and you're right back to where you were, okay? Cool, so we want to know whether or not you have Node installed. And there's two different ways we can actually there's one way we do this for everybody, and it's exactly the same command for every single person in the room. It's node, N-O-D-E, -v. So if you type in node-v, V standing for version, and you hit enter, it should tell you which version you're on. Now, you guys might be on 10.15.3 because that's the newest version. I'm on 10.5.0, but I can change it.
11.5.
11.5? Did they seriously like change their version in like a day and a half? 10.10? Basically, as long as it is not 8.1 or before, then you're fine. I'm totally cool as long as you're beyond version 8. Okay? Now, you say 11.5. It's not 0.11.5.
No, it's V 11.5.
Okay, cool. We've got like some prototype version you're using, whatever. As long as it works, that's all that matters. All right, cool. Did anybody have an error when they typed in node-v? Like this could not be found, this command doesn't exist, anything like that? No? Okay, awesome. So we're kind of off to the races here. Cool. So we obviously want to test our installation and make sure it works. So I'm going to show you a couple of things, like how we can actually use the command prompt to move around and navigate, right? So now I'm in my users folder, which is a great place for me to be, because that's where I'm going to put my documents, that's where I'm going to put, my project folders, whatever else. If I want to create a new project folder in here, what I can do is I can use the command mkdir, which stands for make directory. So I'm going to put a new project folder in there called mkdir space, and then I'm going to follow that with a name. Now, if you're on Windows and you want to use dashes or spaces, you need to quote whatever it is. If you're on Mac, you have to escape it, which is kind of annoying. The best way around it, don't use spaces. That's the easiest way to do it. Don't use spaces. Call it whatever you're going to call it. I'm going to call it comp 2068.
Can you create that view?
Literally, well, somewhere where you're going to find it, right? So I would recommend doing it wherever command prompt shows up for now. Yeah. And if I hit enter, the wonderful thing doesn't tell me anything. Doesn't tell me it was successful. Doesn't tell me there was an error. It literally tells me nothing. The good news is, if it didn't work, it would tell you that. However, it won't give you any validation. Sorry, millennials. No validation. So it's not going to tell you it actually created it for you. However, we can find that out. All we have to do is actually get into the directory. And no, we're not going to go out to the File Explorer. We're going to start from right here and go to that directory. And the way we do that is we use CD. CD is like our go-to tool for this. And the name of our directory. And follow along here. Type in the first few letters of your actual directory, just the first few letters, and then hit tab. And if you hit tab, it should autofill it for you. If it doesn't, you may have to use capital letters if you used capital letters first. Once it's actually spit it out, all you do is hit enter, and you'll notice in my particular system, it now tells me that I'm in the comp 2068 directory. Yours should do the same. Now, obviously, I don't have anything in this directory. I have no files in this directory because we just created it, right? If I want to know whether there's files in this directory, there's two different ways I can do that. If you're on Windows, to list the contents of the directory, you simply type that dir command, okay? if you're on Mac or PowerShell or Linux, anybody rolling Linux in here? No? But you have before? Okay. Yeah, if you're using Linux, PowerShell, or Mac, you're actually going to type ls. So ls, and when I type it and hit enter, obviously I don't have anything in the directory, so there's nothing there. If you type dir, it's probably just going to show you your path, right? Cool, so I want to create a file in there. Now, if you're in PowerShell, Linux, or Mac, it's very easy to create a file in there. If you are not in PowerShell, Linux, or Mac, you have to do something a little bit more different. So for you Windows users that are using command prompt, let me just clear my screen here. The Windows users, you have to do this. You have to do, I think it's FC with a greater than symbol, and then the name of the file you want to create. So we're going to call it test.js. So you do FC greater than test.js. And hit enter. Did anybody get an error? You did get an error? Maybe it's not FC. I'm trying to remember how you actually create a file in command prompt.
There is also another way.
You can echo it too, can't you?
Code. There code install. VS Code type VS Code space.
Right. I'm trying to do it from the native command line. Let's see here. Make directory. Oh, you can also type null and then the bracket. So you can do this as well. Hold on. Sorry, clicked the wrong thing. All right, you can also do this. It's type null greater than and then the name of the file. That will also work for command prompt only, not PowerShell. If you're in PowerShell, it's actually quite a bit easier. Obviously, if I hit enter, that's not going to work. Or maybe it did. That's weird. Oh, it actually works on Mac. I didn't know it would actually work for Mac. Here, give me 1 second. Let me remove that file. Okay. Now when I type, yeah, it's gone. Okay. If you're on, it's not. Okay, what we're going to do, if it didn't work for you, we have one more fallback. Just wait. If you're on Mac, PowerShell, or Linux, your lives are so much easier. You simply touch that file. Touch test.js, hit enter, and your file is created for you. Touch doesn't work in PowerShell? That's weird. Okay, so not in PowerShell. So basically newer than me. All right, for the rest of you, last but not least, open up your file directory structure. So Windows Explorer. Navigate to where that directory is, which will be in your users folder, right? It'll be wherever you started from. So navigate to that directory. So mine's comp 2068. I got to sort my files though. There it is. Okay. You're not going to have anything in there yet. And I believe in Windows you can right click and create a new file. Can you not? Yeah. So right click, choose to create a new file, and call it test.js.
I used the type null one and it said that I couldn't do it, but then it came back.
Yeah, that same thing happened.
But you have a test.js file? All right, that's cool. I mean, most times we're going to use the project directory and just do it in our IDE. It's just more or less to show you that you can do this kind of stuff. RM for me, it's not the same in Windows, I don't think. It would be RM, probably. Yeah. I will post a cheat sheet for this type of stuff as well. All right, so that leads us to the next difficult subject. IDE, right? So those of you that had JavaScript with me, I use Sublime, right? That was like my go-to. The ones I've suggested in the past are Visual Code, Brackets, Atom. Those are all good IDEs. Visual Studio, like if you really want to torture yourself, go ahead and use Visual Studio. I mean, it's only 6.5 gigs to download the Node module, but like whatever. If you're really hardcore and you want to rock out a notepad, go for it. But I've switched. I've officially switched. I switched to Visual Code, and there's a reason why I switched to Visual Code, and I'll show you this reason. What's that? Connor did not convince me. He did try. No, what convinced me is the theme. This theme, Synthwave. This theme is the most awesomest theme in the world. because as I type, my text blows, and I love it. It's absolutely. I thought I was going to hate it. I thought I was going to give it up, but I've been rocking it for 2 weeks now, and I absolutely love it. So I've switched to Visual Code. I've made this thing basically sublime in the end, anyways. So that's what I'm rocking this actual semester. It'll just be Visual Code. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our IDEs, whatever IDE it is that you're using. It doesn't really matter. And you want to navigate to where we created that folder and open it in your IDE as a project, okay? Which is really just file. Usually in most IDEs, it's file and open. Navigate to wherever your file folder is and just open the whole folder. It's complex. If you want to do it, I will post how I did it. But like installing the theme itself was simple. But then you need to download custom CSS and JS loader. You have to change the file permissions on VS Code so that it will allow you to run it as an administrator. And then you have to enable the custom JS file. And the file has to exist.
Visual Code myself.
Yep. Yeah, I'll post the instructions. Yeah. I've done it on all my editors. It's on my Linux box at home, it's on my Linux box at work, and it's on this thing now.
It's cool.
It's everywhere. All right, so go ahead and open up your test.js file, and it's going to be nicely empty, right? Just ignore this thing. I got to fix my linter. It doesn't like things I've done. Now, I find like this big sidebar kind of gets in my way and it cuts off my screen. So I'm going to collapse it. The way I collapse my sidebar is with Command KB. It's Control KB in Windows or whatever you're using. And it works both in Sublime and in VS Code. All right. And obviously, we're going to do the most generic, boring test in the whole wide world. Hello world. Console.log. We're going to console log it, right? I mean, that's the best part too. Don't you love the little fluorescent light bulb that shows up as the hint?
Nice.
I mean, they've really paid so much attention to this. Console log, right? That's basically the equivalent. Does anybody actually put that together? What console log is like, what it does? Right, but on what stream is it logging it out to? Does anybody know the streams in the background in your system? Every single programming language can access these streams. std in, which allows you to grab input, and std out, which allows you to create output. And console log is actually accessing the std out and outputting to it. And interestingly enough, your print statements in Java are doing the exact same thing that JavaScript's doing. It accesses std out and feeds it, right? Ruby's put statements, PHP's print statement, all of those guys are all doing the same thing. They're accessing std out. All right, so we're gonna, hello world, use single quotes. If you have a linter, you definitely want to use single quotes because the linter freaks out. It doesn't like double quotes, tells you to use single quotes. It doesn't like my semicolon. Feels like it's anti-ES6. So it wants me to remove it, but I'm not going to. And that's it. So we have console, log, hello world in there. So how do we run this file? Well, if we were in the client-side JavaScript class, we would open up Chrome, and we would open our file in Chrome, and then we'd open up the console window and go look at it, and we'd see it in the console window. But we're in Node, right? So get used to that terminal because we're going to be using it a lot. Open up your terminal. Make sure you're in the directory where that test file is, right? And as scary as it seems, it's actually the simplest line in the world to write. All you have to do is type in the word node. Does anybody want to guess the next part? Nope. Yeah, test.js. That's it. Test.js, and if you hit enter, it should say hello world. Oh, you broke it. Anybody not get hello world? Just you. What did you get? You didn't great. Hello. Yep. Ah. So it was user error. We call that a pebcac error. Do you know what pebcac means? Problem exists between computer and chair. All right. So you run your first node You have not run your first node file. Virginia has not run her first node file. Let's see here. Oh, because you didn't put it. Oh, no, you didn't. So we have node. Did you call it first? So this is a weird thing in PowerShell when it does this. I'm not sure why it's
So I
on.
have to go to the file.
Yeah, if you do F and then hit tab, it will load it in for you. And enter. Did you console log? No, you did. That's very bizarre. Okay. Definitely will. All right, so that gives us hello world. We can now see hello world on our system. So I'm going to actually take another small break just to help a couple of students who have gotten stuck. So if you've gotten stuck or haven't been able to start, then I will help you out. Other than that, you can take 10 minutes, and then when we come back, I'll go through and we'll do the quick JavaScript review, and then hopefully we'll end a bit early. Like, that'd be kind of nice. I'm tired. All right, cool. All right, cool. We're actually going to go to, there's a part in this lesson that says blocking and non-blocking. We won't cover that part this week. I want to keep us kind of in line with what Mondays is doing. So that will be pushed to next week, the blocking and non-blocking part. So it's just basic JavaScript, super, super basic JavaScript that we basically covered just last semester. But hopefully it will help you with a recap. Yeah, let's get into it. Also next week, we're going to be taking a look at some ES6 transitions. So we're going to look at things that are in vanilla JavaScript that we're going to start translating over to ES6 and actually start using ES6 syntax with. So some of it you've already done. So like let and const we've been using quite a bit. So you guys are already used to that. But we're also going to take a look at like the arrow function and start getting used to the arrow function and using the arrow function primarily because it's just nice, clean syntax. It also has a little bit of a different, meaning in the context of this, you know, the powerful keyword this, right? It has a bit of a different meaning with that context. So we'll take a look at that next week as well. All right. Cool. So let's do some basic stuff. So obviously we need an IDE. Make sure you have an IDE open. We can just use the test doc. Like, that's totally fine. None of this is going to be our project stuff, so it's really just review. So that's fine to go in that file. All right. So let's talk about variables. I'm sure we all remember how variables are created. The biggest thing I find that tends to, you know, kind of trip people up is scope. So really, let's talk about scope because that's really the big thing. We're never going to use var in this class. Var is gone, so just pretend var doesn't exist. We'll always be using let and const. We won't use global variables, obviously. So if we want like a global scope for a variable, then we'll need to make sure that it's at the top of our file and allows it to cascade down, right? So we'll always be using let and const. And obviously that does create an issue. Like for example, if I have a block, which you can literally type just like that, you don't need. Now think about all the things that cover a block. Like think about all the structures that use blocks, right? So I'll give you an example. An if condition uses a block. What other structures use blocks? Switch statements use blocks, yep. While, definitely. So if while uses, then so must do while, right? Somebody said for. Who said, yep, for loops, 100%, right? Those are all blocks. And one of the big things that you'll program quite a bit, functions, right? Functions use blocks. So var is only functionally scoped, whereas let and const are actually block scoped, which means if you define a constant inside an if condition, that is only scoped to the if condition. So when you try to access it outside of it, it's no longer available. And you know what? Let's use that as an example because I think that's a little bit more contextual than looking at just a plain block. So if you type if, and we'll just use true, right? So when will this run? Literally always, right? Because it's true. So we'll do if true. And then inside here, why don't we set a couple of constants? So when you think of constants, these are values that generally don't change, right? And we'll actually use constant a lot in this class because we'll be working with objects so much. And objects are simply just references to points in memory. Because of that, we'll be using constants quite a bit because we'll never actually reassign anything to that constant that isn't the object that was already assigned to it. So we'll be using const quite a bit. So let's use const. And, your name might change, right? You might get married and hitched, and you might change your last name. So I don't think name's really applicable as a constant. But your date of birth is. Like, you really can't change when you were born, right? Unless you find out new information. So let's do DOB. And just type in your date of birth. I like to do it year, month, and day. Right? And then for let, the difference between let and const, yes, they are both block scope, but they have a distinct difference. Does anybody remember what that distinct difference is between let and const?
Let is mutable.
No, both of those are still block scope. They have the same scope range.
Let is mutable.
Exactly. Let is mutable. It means it can be changed. You can modify the value once you've assigned it, whereas const, it's in the name. It's constant, right? It means it can't be changed. It's totally immutable. You can't modify it at a later point. That's an important concept to understand with const. The thing about const and let, though, is const is more efficient than let because const allocates the exact memory that is required for the value that's been assigned to it. Whereas let kind of has to be open-ended, and every time you reassign a new value, let actually has to copy its current value over to a new location in memory and then reassign new memory to it. So let is actually less efficient. So whenever you can utilize const, you should be utilizing const. And that's actually true in like all programming languages. Whenever you can use a constant, you should try to, because it is a lot better for you for efficiency of code. All right, so we're going to use let. Date of birth is never going to change, but your age is, because every single year is going to change, right? So let's do age. My God, that horrible number. I can't believe it's already there. Like, it feels like just yesterday I was 24. But, yeah, all right. Yeah, but I don't age like you do, Lulu.
Yeah, because I'm older than him. Yes.
You are not older than me.
Make you younger, right?
Yeah. All right. So we have this wonderful if true statement, and when is this going to execute? Literally always. Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to save. Now I'm going to try something very, very naughty. I am going to try to access both these variables outside of my block. So, want to use some dirty backticks? And why not, right? Dirty backticks are awesome. So let's do console.log, not console, console.log. Sounds dangerously like a curse word. There we go. And I'm going to say my B-day is, and we got to use this wonderful $ curly brace syntax, which is our interpolation syntax, which allows us to plug the variable right in there. Right? My B-day is DOB.
Oh, using a normal string or is it a tilde?
Sorry, it's the backticks. Yeah, so you'll find the backticks underneath your escape key. So underneath your escape key, you'll see the tilde. If you don't press shift, you'll get the backticks. And they allow for string interpolation in JavaScript. String interpolation is basically allows you to, within your string, evaluate JavaScript expressions right directly within your string. Which makes it super, super powerful. I like backticks. We'll write this in two ways. We'll write it this way, and we'll also write it with string concatenation so you can see the similarities. And I am blah, 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 age. All right. And like I said, we'll write this also. I'm just going to duplicate it. I duplicate with Command-Shift-D. You can do it with Control-Shift-D. It will duplicate the line you're currently on. And I'll write this out with concatenation. I'll use single quotes. There we go. I don't need these guys. So we'll get rid of them. Now I just need to figure out where each of these things are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on DOB, and I'm going to hit my quote character, which will wrap that in quotes. And then what operator do I use for concatenation in JavaScript? Yeah, exactly, the plus character. There we go. Do it again. Plus, plus. Now, my IDE is freaking out. It's like, there's red everywhere. Look at all the red, right? And the reason why it's freaking out, does anybody know why it's freaking out, why it's mad?
Is it because of your teeth?
It's because of my theme. No, it loves my theme. My theme is awesome. Well, I have linter. That's probably why.
What's JSLint?
Yeah, it's JSLint that's causing it to freak out. But why is JSLint freaking out? Why is it mad? Yeah,
Because it wasn't declared outside the block.
exactly. So these literally have no reference. I'm using variables that have no reference. They've never been defined because we defined it in the block and the scope ended the second we hit that closing curly brace. Scope is done. It's gone, right? And we can actually see that if we save, go ahead and save your file. Open up your terminal or your command prompt, right? Now, interestingly enough, to run our file, you can cheat. Instead of running node test.js, just press up. It'll be the last command you typed, right? And you can actually cycle through all of your commands by just pressing up.
Is there a reason Sublime doesn't give me, like,
You need a linter. Oh, you don't have some, yeah, you need a linter. Yeah. So have you installed the package control manager in Sublime? So there's if you type in Sublime package control, it will actually walk you through on how to install the package control manager, and then you can install the linter through that way, or you can download VS Code, which is so much easier to use extensions. It's totally up to you. All right, so go ahead and run it, and of course you should get a nasty error. And the nasty error we get is DOB is not defined, right? And the reason why it's not defined is because we are outside of its scope, right? So if you look at our file, this curly brace and this curly brace, it's like its own little world. It's its own little universe. And the things we have defined in this little universe only exist in this little universe. They don't exist outside of this little universe, right? If we want these to be applicable, we literally need to move these outside so that they become a part of the universe that we're currently trying to console log out of. So why don't we just do that? Why don't we just copy these guys? And we'll just paste them outside. Notice the linter's fine. Still doesn't like my semicolons, but whatever. It can get bent. But the rest of it is totally fine with. For some reason, it doesn't like the number 40, which is good because I don't either. So, not entirely sure why it doesn't. Let's find out. Says it's an extra semicolon. Whatever. It really has big issues with semicolons. I might shut off JSLint because it's really annoying. All right, so now if I jump back to my iTerm, jump back to your terminal, press up, hit enter. Ah, look, no errors, and everything's spitting out, and everybody's happy, and everything's all nice and fine, right? Did you say you're not happy?
I put a sad face in my console logo.
Oh, wow. So the thing is now the one issue I have is that I've defined these two variables, but I'm no longer using them, which is inefficient, right? If you're using something like Go will actually freak out about that. It doesn't let you set variables that you don't use, right? Some other programming languages get kind of annoyed with it too. C++ actually gets annoyed with it as well. But we're using JavaScript. And JavaScript, does anybody remember what JavaScript is? JavaScript is an animal-typed language. What was the animal I used? No. No, not camel case. Duck. Exactly, duck type. Which means if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it must be a duck. And that's the way JavaScript is. That's why we don't use data types, right? Because JavaScript doesn't care. It says, well, it looks like a string, smells like a string, probably tastes like a string, so it's likely a string. That's the way JavaScript works. It's duck typed, right? So, cool. So everything's working here. Get a little bit of a refresher into variables, and that leads to the point that data types are not something that you need to explicitly set. They're implicit. They're implied, right? It automatically figures out what the data type is. Now, data types that JavaScript supports. It supports strings. Totally cool. Love strings. It supports numbers. So not floats, decimals, ints, unsigned ints, stuff like that. It's literally just numbers. They're all encapsulated under one data type. Okay? It supports Booleans, right? True and false. Totally easy data types. Other data types that are built into it are also null, which is a data type, undefined, which is a data type. They are separate. They are not the same thing. They are different. And it also supports objects. Now, arrays are also kind of a data type, but arrays in JavaScript are actually objects. They're technically an object. Not a huge important thing for you to know, but something to be aware of. All right, cool. Let's do some more fun stuff. Seeing as how we're already talking about arrays, why don't we create a couple of arrays? Let's create a superhero array. Let's take a vote. How many people want a DC array?
Ooh.
Oh, there's some hatred out there. You hear the snap, right? So I take it we're going Marvel array.
Absolutely.
Any Top Cow fans? No? Okay. Let's go Marvel. So we'll do let Marvel equals, I mean, you can do DC. You can literally do whatever you want. That's totally up to you. Do beer. Do a list of beer. All right. Let's populate this. We'll put Captain America. Let's get Black Widow. Let's throw Mysterio in there. I mean, he was in the preview today.
We'll get Iron Man.
Let's do Iron Man. No, I'm going to do Iron Spider. Oh, and if we're going to be obscure, let's be really obscure. Let's do Claw,
Oh, wow.
which is when the Hulk hulks out.
I got Ant-Man and Thanos. It's the most important one.
Oh my God, this list is going to get ridiculous. Yeah. Well, if I'm going to do Ant-Man, I'm going to do better. I'll do Giant Man.
I can't believe you have to put Iron Man in there.
And I mean, Thanos is just Thanos. What's that?
You did Giant Man, you didn't do Iron Man?
Yeah. Well, I've got Iron Spider. I mean, it's still Peter, but whatever. Okay, so cool. And you know what? I will do Iron Man, but I'll use it in a different example. So arrays in JavaScript are actually objects. And the reason how we actually know it's an object is arrays have properties and they have methods available to them, which means it has to be an object because only objects have properties and methods available to them. That's how they become objects, right? That's how we know they're an object. And in JavaScript, objects don't have to be instantiated. They're immediate. They exist instantly, right? All objects in JavaScript are instantaneous. They are not instantiated from a class. You don't need to do that, right? You don't need to have some sort of blueprint. You can make them exist instantaneously, okay? So Marvel, yes, it's an array, but it's technically an object. So let's prove that. Console log. JavaScript has a type of operator. C++ also has a type of operator. The type of operator actually tells you the data type of the thing that you are looking at, whatever your variable is. So if you type of Marvel, save that. Where are we going to go? To go check this? To our terminal, right? Command prompt terminal. Press up, hit enter. Ta-da! It's an object. All right. Okay. So that's fine. So now we know that there's properties and methods, and technically there aren't methods in JavaScript. Technically they are all properties. However, a method is a property with a function definition assigned to it. Kind of weird, right? But we're going to call it properties and methods just for simplicity's sake. So we have one very common property that we'll use. It's console.log marvel dot. How do I tell the number of elements in my array? Length, exactly. Marvel.length. And that will actually give us back the number of elements in the array, which should be 7, right? So we'll do a couple of things before we jump back to the terminal and actually execute it. I want to add Iron Man to Marvel. So let's do that. We'll do Marvel dot, and I want to add it to the end, Mo. How would I add it to the end?
Well, this shift?
That's to the beginning.
Yeah, shift. So.
But I want to add it to the end. Push, exactly.
No, you want to do shift.
We're going to push it. Going to push it real good. All right, Iron Man.
I'm doing shift. I don't know what you.
It's going to do shift next. Way to ruin my thunder. All right. Who are we going to shift onto it?
Definitely Thor.
Thor? All right. So Marvel.shift, not shig, shift. There we go. Thor. Just going to put that there. I mean, you're only slightly nerd if you write Thor. You're uber nerd if you write Thor, Jane. All right, so we have these new heroes attached to our Marvel array. And now I want to actually do a console log, marvel.length, but stop. I'm going to show you something interesting. I'm going to come up here where it says marvel.length. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-D to duplicate my line. So now my line is duplicated and available to me. If I'm on Mac, I believe it's Command and Control to move it. Yeah, Command and Control will move it up and down. If you are on Windows, I believe it's Control-Shift to move it up and down. And you can actually move the line up and down through wherever you want it. Learning those type of little skills inside your IDE will help you to be a quicker developer, right? Because it'll make things go a lot faster when you don't have to copy and paste and then move it to the right location. Just use your IDE available to you. What's that?
Command-Shift-D.
Command-Shift-D to duplicate. Command-Control on Mac to move it up and down.
But that didn't work.
Are you in Sublime or VS Code?
VS Code.
I've installed Sublime shortcuts, so maybe that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be different, but it does support it. I know for a fact it does. Try Control-Shift up and down. Does that move it? Try Command-Shift and up and down. Then I have no idea. Yeah, just look up the code for it. All right, cool. So obviously now this is a good point to run it. So let's go ahead and open up our node, or our thing, terminal. Hit up, and you should get 7 and 7. Why do we get 7? That's weird.
Yeah.
That is totally weird. Let's go check and see why we're getting 7. We've pushed Iron Man onto Marvel. We shifted Thor onto Marvel, but there is an issue. These things in client-side scripting will actually push them on and do something destructive to the original array. If I'm correct, that's not the case in Node. I think we have to actually reassign it, which means we'd have to do Marvel equals to get it to do it properly. Kind of like the text content thing. This was not planned, by the way. I kind of thought it would just work the same way, but it didn't. If we jump back over to the terminal and press up, no, it doesn't like that. No, it's shift. Wow, it's like just flat out freaking out. It doesn't like any part of this. Oh, right. Hold on. No, we got serious issues. So marvel.push is not correct assigned, and marvel.shift is not correct assigned. That is very strange. Why are we not getting things in the proper operation? We should have 9. Is it on shift?
Yes.
Oh, you know what? You're 100% correct. It is on shift. Sorry about that. Let's switch that over to unshift. Right, shift actually pops it up. So here's literally what was happening. I'm adding Iron Man, and then I'm removing Captain America. So obviously they're the same length. This is live, people. All right. There we go. Now we got 9. It's one of those times where you doubt the application. You question the programming. And you're like, no, it's your fault, language. It's totally your fault. But no, in the end, it turns out to be a pepcac error. All right, let's jump back. So this is simple stuff with an array that's not very complex. Right? This is pretty basic stuff. But it kind of leads us into the whole idea of iterations, right? Because obviously when we have an array, like a list of items, often we want to iterate through that list of items. And in order to iterate through that list of items, we have a few possibilities available to us. It is not going to be very often that we actually use while loops in this class, so don't really worry about it or do while loops. Plus, the syntax is identical to Java anyways. However, we will be using for loops a lot, and we'll be using ES6 for loops even more. And the ES6 for loops are the for in loop, which we've talked about, which allows you to iterate over what type of structure? What do for in loops allow you to iterate over? Remember? No? Objects. Allows us to iterate over the object keys. Whereas for of loops allow us to iterate over arrays. Wow. Okay, good thing we're doing a review. Okay, so let's iterate over this wonderful array. And we can do it in two ways. Surprisingly enough, a lot of people on Monday seem to prefer this way, which is weird. So let's create a for loop, right? So we have a for loop. For loop takes 3 arguments, right? The first argument is the instantiated variable. So we'll do let I equal 0. That's our instantiated variable, right? The second argument is our condition. Whatever our condition is actually going to be is I less than, and I want to iterate over my array. So the easiest way to get that next number is by doing marvel.length, right? Because I only want to iterate the number of times it is the length of the array. And then the last one is our incrementer or decrementer, or whatever method or function call we want to do to be able to resolve after each one of those is true. So I'm going to do I++. Okay. Now I have a block, and I'm ready to apply logic that's literally going to execute on every single iteration, right? So I have 9 values in my array. I am going to iterate 9 times and execute whatever the logic is in the block. Now I want to spit out the name, right? And I have to remember before I do that, that arrays in JavaScript are what number indexed? 0, exactly. They start at 0, as they do in most languages. It's like one language that I can think of that actually starts with 1. Most languages start with 0. So all we have to do is type in console.log marvel, but I don't want to hard code a number in there, right? I want to utilize my variable. So what am I going to put in those brackets? Exactly. I'm going to put I in those brackets. Now it will iterate over, and on each iteration, it's going to pass the value of I in. So the first time, I is going to be what value? Exactly, 0. The next time it will be 1, and it will continually grow until finally it hits and evaluates this as 9, which will fail the condition, right? And therefore the block will not execute. So we can see that, save, go ahead and go into your console. And clear, I'm going to hit up and enter, and whammy blammy, I've got all my wonderful superheroes listed. Now when I'm iterating over array values, there are occasions where I have to do this because I have to have I have to have the index available in order for me to perform other methods. There are ways around that, though. I can use a for each loop on the array, which will allow me to have the index if I wanted. However, for each loops are actually non-blocking, which means they will execute asynchronously, and sometimes that's not what you want. For loops are always blocking code, right? So they will execute, and then the next line will go. So you don't have to worry about them, running asynchronously and things still happening to your values. So if I want a blocking loop over an array, but really nice, clean, readable code, I'm going to use for, let, and I'm going to say hero. Why not, right? It's a throwaway variable. It's whatever value, like whatever name I want to give it. You give it whatever name you want to give it. Of Marvel. Which reads like, it's a little Shakespearean, right? Like hero of Marvel, right? So not necessarily totally human readable, but good enough. And now all we have to do is console log hero. Console log hero. And then We jump back over to our command prompt, press up, hit enter, and you're going to see all 9 heroes get spit out again, but in an exceptionally smaller block of code, right?
Can you use console.log Marvel? Console.log Marvel.
No, console.log hero, because if you console.log Marvel, it will actually take your array, it will cast it to string, and then it will separate them all with commas on its own. Yeah. Anytime you spit any type of data structure in JavaScript out, like to a console, it will call to string on them. So, and what's annoying though is if you do it to objects, it will literally just go object, object, and not show you anything inside of it. So I'm gonna just jump over, press up, and sure enough, there's like a huge list, right? Because it's listed twice. We're gonna list it one more time and use something just a little slightly different. I'm going to show you the for each, right? So we also have the for each method. Now when ES6 came about, the whole idea of the for of loop was basically to create the same for each logic that you have in things like Java, which you can do with the colon, or in Ruby, which you can do with .each, or in PHP, which you can literally do with the command for each, right? So all these other languages have these for eaches, and this was to basically replace the for each method that was built for arrays, which is not nearly as efficient as this is, because this is like a C version of the actual for loop, where for each is literally running a for loop under the hood, so it's a little slower, it benchmarks a little slower. So if we do marvel.for each with a capital E, it takes one argument. Does anybody know what that argument is? It's a function. Yep, it's one of our wonderful callbacks, right? So we have to give it a function, so we literally write the word function, a set of parentheses, and a set of curly braces. Literally the whole function syntax of an anonymous function right inside there as an argument. And the reason why we can get away with that is because functions in JavaScript are actually just a value. What actually executes them? What operator actually executes a function? What operator executes a function in any language?
Parentheses.
Exactly, the parentheses. The parentheses are an operator in JavaScript, and they will actually cause the function to execute. But if you don't put the parentheses on it, you can actually pass that function around your application as a value, which is really awesome because you can assign other things to that function and then execute them somewhere later on, which really allows you a lot of dynamic control over functions. So we have our for each, right? The thing about callbacks is the way they work is Marvel is going to go to for each and it's going to execute for each. And on each iteration, it's going to take one item from Marvel and pass it to the callback function as an argument. So our function is missing a parameter to catch that argument. We need a parameter in order to catch that. So let's go ahead and put a parameter in there, and why don't we just call it hero so you can kind of see the comparison to the above structure, iterative structure. Now, just like any function, right, I can give it a body between these wonderful curly braces and perform some sort of expressions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and stick my cursor in there, hit enter, and now I have a place to actually write logic, and the logic is identical to the other two repetition structures. It's simply, I mean, why not just cheat? Command-Shift-D, Command-Control or Control-Shift, down we go. Super fast, because it's the exact same logic. Now, interestingly enough, when we execute this, it's still just going to give us another 9 of the same superhero, right? So if we jump back over to our command prompt or whatever, press up, hit enter. Now you can see there's like a huge list because now we have 27 heroes listed there, though they're just duplicated, right? If I jump back over, we have one more thing available to us with our for each. If you press comma and press I and add a second parameter in there, or index or whatever you want to call it, totally up to you. And then why don't we just console log that out, console.log I. What will happen is on each iteration, it will pass our item, and then in the second parameter, it's actually going to pass the index of that item available to us. So while for each is a little slower, it's kind of convenient because not only do we get the name of the hero or the item of that array, but we also get the index number. So if that is something that we're banking on needing, now we have both pieces and we can use that. But it's still cleaner and easier to read than a standard for loop, right? But it is important to remember that for each loops are not blocking, which means they can execute asynchronously. So you need to be cautious of that. All right, cool. Any questions about that? No?
I get an error.
You get an error on your for each loop?
Yeah, because I tried to do it like no. Can I can't do it like that.
No, because what you're doing is it only takes one argument. For each it takes only one argument. So if you wanted to do what you're doing, you would write it like this. So like that, right? But now you need your argument.
Oh, not doing it. Oh, okay.
So like that. Yeah. So this thing that Noor is trying out is called a arrow function, and we'll be doing those next week. So don't worry about that right now, but cool. Get him, he's learning on his own. All right.
That's not what I'm doing.
All right, so objects, right? Objects are like the most fundamental thing in JavaScript because you will hear people constantly say, all things in JavaScript are objects. But I'm super, super nerdy, and that's not true. Not all things in JavaScript are objects. We have 5 wonderful primitives. Those 5 wonderful primitives are string literals, number literals, booleans, right? Undefined and null. Those are the only 5 things in JavaScript that are not objects, so completely meaningless. So basically everything in JavaScript is an object. So being said, JavaScript will also implicitly turn things into objects when you're not expecting it to. This thing here is a string literal. It's a primitive object. It actually even goes to a different location in memory, right? It's a wonderful string literal. The second I do that and type that dot, JavaScript takes this, immediately instantiates a brand new object, passes this as the value to it. This is all happening under the hood. Passes it to a value and assigns it the prototypal object of string, which means every type of method that's available to the string constructor now gets attached to it. But you don't see any of that. And that happens the second you hit dot, right? So that's part of the reason why people think all things in JavaScript are objects, because if you're working with a primitive, the second you hit dot, it gets casted into an object. But it happens under the hood. All right, cool. But I'm not talking about those objects. I'm talking about these boring objects. Let student. I mean, why am I using let? Get real. Equals, bam. Anybody remember what that is called when you just do these little curly places? Not block. You're not wrong if you say block, but what is that called? Yeah, exactly. It's called an object literal. It means I'm creating an object. They would be closely compared to structs in other languages. That would be the closest thing I can think to actually compare it to. But yeah, it's an object literal. And objects actually take keys and values. In JavaScript, that's all it's made up of, is keys and values. And those values can be literally anything you want them to be. Those values can be strings, booleans, any of the primitives, right? But it can also be an array, right? Or it can be a whole other object. That's totally fine as well. Or it can be a function. The second you make it a function, though, that's kind of more like a method, right? Because remember how I said functions can be passed around as a value. So you can actually assign a function to a property as a value. So we'll do something kind of like that. We'll do ID. There we go. Name. And they're separated, each one is separated as a key value with a comma. So name would be Sean McKinnon. Age, it's funny, this is a year old, it says 39. Age. But then I can also do something like this. Bio is equal to an anonymous function. Like that. And then I can return. Let's use some backticks. Like so. Right? Pretty basic bio. And I could also do something like this and give it interest, right? Interest. Array. I mean, who's deceiving who? That's all I really do. Though I did get Days Gone last week. I haven't had time to really get into it. I haven't yet had to defeat a swarm. Not looking forward to it. I got super anxiety about it, actually. So that's an object, right? So the object has a name. It's just assigned to a variable. We have an ID, name property, age property, right? The ID is a numeric. The age is a numeric. I mean, if I want to make it a decimal, I totally can. I'm like 4.33, right? The bio is a function. This is just a value. If it helps, pretend this is just a string. Like if that helps you, right? But literally, it's just the actual call. It's literally what's the blocks and the text inside. And then the interest is just an array. And if I wanted to, I could assign another object to it if I totally felt like it, right? If I want to iterate through that and spit out its keys, I actually have a for loop in ES6 that's available to me to do exactly that. However, there is one challenge to that for loop, and that for loop will only actually do a shallow loop, which means it will only go through the first layer of keys, right? Which is fine. We only really have one layer of keys. If I want to dive in to another nested object and go through it, I would have to use something like recursion or some sort of like for loop structure that would allow me to recursively go, or not recursively, but go iteratively through the loop. But we're not going to get into that. It's a little out of scope. So let's build a for loop just to spit out those keys. So we're just going to go for, and it's basically the same idea, right? We're going to do let key in this scenario. But instead of, it's in. So let key in student, which doesn't read as Shakespearean as the other one did. Let key in student's pretty blasé. And then the thing about key is all it is the literal key. It's like that key. You can call this whatever you want it to, though. If you want to call it Bob, call it Bob. It doesn't really matter. It's just a variable. So it's going to, each time it iterates, it's going to take name and shove it in there, age and shove it in there, bio and shove it in there, and interest and shove it in there. That's what it's going to do each time, which is totally fine. So if I want to spit out the key, I just do console.log key. All right. Save that. And it's going to do just that. It's not going to give me the value. That's the absolute takeaway from this. You're not going to get the value from that. You're only going to get the key. If you jump over to your terminal, press up and hit enter, you'll see that, sure enough, I get all the keys, right? I get ID, name, age, bio, and interest. How do we get the values, Mo wants to know. The way we get the values is just like an array is technically an object. The thing you might be thinking is like, okay, well, if an array is an object, what are its properties? Well, 0 through to whatever index number it is. Each one of those technically applies as a property, right? And when we access an array value, we do it with the array name, and then we use our wonderful little square brackets, right? And we plug in our index number. The cool thing about objects is we actually support two different syntaxes that we can do. If we wanted to access, say, student name, for example, I can do console.log student.name. So I support dot syntax, just like you would in Java or whatever, right? But where JavaScript really shines is it supports dot syntax, but it also supports square index syntax, which is super awesome because it allows us to do some pretty cool meta stuff. So I could do console.log student, square brackets, and just pass a key. And then what will happen is now each one of those keys, name, age, so on, will actually reference the value that's in student at that index location. And the reason that is, for those of you that like the kind of more under the hood idea, is that each of those keys is referencing a memory location. So it's just spitting out what's in the memory location, right? That's how arrays work too, incidentally. So go ahead and hit save. Jump back over to your terminal. And there it goes. Now you will notice though, and kind of like what I was saying to Virginia before, when you try to spit something out like a string, it will literally just call toString on that particular thing, right? So if you look, you can see toString worked here, that's fine, we get Sean McKinnon, right? We get 40.33, but if you try type of on that, it would say type of string. Bio though, right? We get function bio, because that's what happens when you take a function definition and call toString on it. Interest. Notice what it's done here. It kept the square brackets, but it immediately comma separated everything for us. So it basically called it to join on it. And then that's it for that. If you wanted to actually iterate through them properly and make sure you were calling the correct method on each one properly, you would have to use a decision structure like an if condition or a switch and check the type ofs, right? So that you make sure that you do perform the correct operation. Now with arrays, that gets tricky because it's always type of objects. So you have to use constructor name in order to check that one. But that's a little bit out of scope. If you want to know more, I'd be happy to send you the information. All right. I think, well, you know what? We wrote a function. I think we're good. Yeah, okay. So control statements, exactly the same as they are in Java. In actually any language whatsoever. You can't see that because it's not on the screen. Hold on, let me jump over. It's the only problem with using two separated computers. I forget what you're actually seeing. So there's control statements. I mean, they're the exact same as they are in any language. It's an if condition is an if condition is an if condition. Conditional operators are the same in any language except for JavaScript supports strict operations, so you can use equals, 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 and not equals, equals. Also less than equals, equals, and greater than equals, equals. So it supports those type of operations as well, but it also supports implicit boolean, which basically means if you write flag here, if this is equal to 40, it's still true, right? Basically, as long as it's not null, undefined, false, or 0, it's still true. Okay? So you got to be careful about that because 0 will evaluate as false. So you want to make sure that you're explicitly evaluating it. One trick around that is double exclamation marks. Double exclamation marks will cast it out to the boolean, which is kind of cool, so it's a way around that. And then ternararies. This is the only other thing that we may use on occasion. So I would get used to ternararies, but how many of you have actually written a ternary before? So a few of you, yeah. We will do a lot of shorthand in this class because I kind of like writing in shorthand, so we'll get used to all those little nuances and I'll explain them as we go. Other than that, I think that's it for tonight. Next week we'll do blocking and unblocking, but you are welcome to look ahead because it's right there. And then, yeah, we'll build a node server next week. Cool.